We're hoping the presentation today will be interactive. As you have thoughts and questions, please do chime in, raise your hand, and let us know what your thoughts are. I wanted to mention too that on May 14th, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., I believe it is, we are planning to host an open house and barbecue at the Cleveland Jet Center, which is where the simulator is located. And I want to put in a good word for the Cleveland Jet Center as well. They're open every day from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. It's a really nice state-of-the-art facility. They've got lounge areas, meeting rooms, computers, and beverages and snacks available. That's where we are located. It's at CGF, Cuyahoga County Airport, at the Cleveland Jet Center. I want to talk just for a couple minutes about the features of the simulator that we're going to be talking about today. It's a Redbird TD, Advanced Aircraft Training Device. It does have dynamic yoke loading, so when you do go into a turn, if you went into a 2G turn, you would get that responsive feedback on the flight controls. We have two panels in the simulator. There's a G1000 glass panel and a steam gauge panel, which has the Garmin 430-530 combination. There's a couple of members of your group here that come up and fly with us in the sim frequently. One of which is Ron Seawick, who probably has more time flying the sim. I know he's got more time flying the sim than anybody else, including Bill and myself. He's been a routine client. He comes up there just about every week. And Gary Weaver is here as well. He flies with us up there. So over the last 3 weeks, Rick Rice, the owner, and myself came up with a list of reasons why you would want to use a simulator to become a safer pilot. And what we did was we prepared this PowerPoint using those different reasons. We've got one slide for each of the bullet points that we came up with. Becoming familiar with a new airport, learning advanced avionics, experiencing instrument and systems failures in a safe environment, different weather conditions, and things like that. So the presentation today will focus on those different items. We'll go through one at a time. Each topic has a video embedded, and that's why we were up here for a few minutes before we started, just to make sure the videos played well and the sound was okay in the videos. And what we're going to do is play the videos as we move through the presentation, and we're going to stop a few times during the playing of the videos, and please, once again, if you have any thoughts or questions while the videos are playing, raise your hand, we'll stop and we'll talk about it. Okay, we know the military uses flight simulators frequently as part of their required training. I know the airlines do as well. There's a requirement for captains to do their proficiency checks every 6 months, and first officers at least once a year. So professional pilots use simulators. So for us in the general aviation community, we can emulate that approach and use simulators to enhance our flying skills. And why would you want to do that? Well, one of the first reasons is to become familiar with an airport that you haven't been into before. And the owner, Rick Rice, is planning to fly into Bozeman, Montana this summer. So one of the first video clips, we can relocate the aircraft simulator to Bozeman and do practice approaches there, and that's what we're going to show next. So what we're going to do is we're going to depart from runway 30 to Bozeman. We're going to track outbound on the localizer. You're going to get radar vectors. come back around, intercept the localizer, and shoot ILS runway 12 approach and repose. We have a current up-to-date database. We can relocate you to any airport in the U.S. And that's me at the instructor station doing that, relocating Rick to runway 30 at Bozeman. Runway 30. Wait for a scenery to load. Give you a few seconds to enjoy the great weather here in Bozeman before I make it ugly. I'm going to change the weather. Winds will be in the southeast, at almost 10 knots. We've had a cloud layer.
One thing to point out is when we add cloud layers, we don't do it often because most of you come in, you want to fly IFR, but we can have multiple cloud layers, so you can climb out, get into the clouds, break out of those clouds, climb in clear skies, and then get into another layer of clouds. So we can do multiple cloud layers.
We have a nice low ceiling. 300 feet. Overcast skies. Be some cumulus clouds here. Some turbulence will give you some heavy rain. Okay, we'll break out right at the indicated altitude of the clouds. Give you a half-mile visibility. Okay, I'm ready to make it ugly. He's leaning it out for higher density altitude. Okay, so once again, Rick knows he's going to that airport this summer. He can practice any different type of approach into that airport. So that's when we say familiarization, that's what we're talking about. You can practice in advance anywhere that you may plan to go in the future.
Can you talk for a minute about using your own iPads? You know, we all use it for flight. And, you know, when you get into something like that, it would be nice if I could just kind of use my own.
Absolutely. In fact, there is a video clip that shows a lot of that. So that's a great point. And let me know if you have questions when you see the iPads, and I talk about the bad elf and things like that. When we get to that in the videos, please let me know if you have questions at that point. We can get into more detail. But yes, we can do that. That's okay. No, that's perfect. Thank you. I do appreciate questions while we're talking too, so we can stop the videos and discuss any points that you might like to as these videos play. Using the simulator. How much is an IPC? It's in terms of what it would cost. Well, can I answer that afterward, because I can let you know different scenarios for pricing and things. It'll depend on what you're looking for and hoping to do. We can use a simulator. Once again, I'm going to keep this generic. A simulator can be used for instrument training, and one of the scenarios that I'm going to talk about and show in this next video is I can relocate people around a VOR station and ask them to figure out where they are, track the station, and perform different types of holds That's a very, very easy task for me to do in the simulator, and as a pilot going through training, that saves you a lot of time and money because you don't have to actually fly west, north, south, and east of the station. I can relocate you very quickly here, and I'm going to demonstrate that right now. In addition to holding and tracking, of course, basic instrument approach procedures, we can practice those in a sim. I can relocate you back on the localizer so you can get in 5 or 6 approaches in a simulator, whereas in real life you might only have time during the same time frame to do 1 or 2 approaches.
You know, I was talking about how I can move people around. So the name of the station that we're going to move everybody around here is Chardon. Practice holding around this VOR, Chardon VOR, which is Charlie X-Ray Romeo, CXR. So this is the station that we're going to reposition the airplane around, and I can reposition the airplane north, west, south, or east of the station at so many nautical miles, and have the airplane at different altitudes, headings, and airspeeds. So that's what I'm going to demonstrate right now. And this is great to learn hold entries, to try to get back to the station and hold. And it's also great for situational awareness for somebody to figure out that they are in fact north or west or south of the station and what heading they're on and what radio they're on from the station. So the way we do that is we can go here and relocate. I can program in the altitude. So let's put Rick at 3,000 feet. I can say I want him at a cruise airspeed. Change the aircraft's heading around the full 360-degree spectrum here. If I want him heading west, I can put him on 270. So let's put him north of the Chardon VOR on a heading of west. So I can reposition by navigate, and I can say, okay, I want Rick to be, let's say, 7 miles from CXR, and I want his bearing to be 270. So in this scenario, he's on a heading of west, and he's west of the station, 7 miles. So when I reposition him, you're going to see him appear on the screen. The whole screen will probably shift, but you'll see him west of the station. There he is, west of the station, on a heading of west, and he's 7 miles from the station. All right, so just like I programmed, Rick is now on a heading of west at 3,000 feet when I took him off of pause. And now if Rick was an instrument student, I could say something like, Rick, I want you to figure out which radial you're on. Which radial are you on from the Chardon VOR? And he could spin this and say, well, it looks like I'm west of the VOR. And yes, I am. I am west of the VOR. It confirms that. And then I could say, well, if you want to track directly to the Chardon VOR, what heading would you need to be on? You could say, well, pretty much east to get back to the station. And then I could give him holding instructions like hold east of the Chardon VOR at 3,000 feet with 4-mile legs. And then he would have to fly back to the station, figure out what type of entry, what type of hold entry to make to get back into the Chardon VOR. Okay, so there's an example, okay? I'm going to give you a couple more examples, and you'll see in real life you would actually have to physically fly the plane to all these different locations. But now I can say, all right, I'm going to put you on pause. He has no idea where I'm going to put him. But I can relocate him, and he doesn't even have to close his eyes, because he's gonna reappear somewhere around this station, and he's gonna have to use his instruments to figure it out. So I can do this time after time after time, and it just reinforces how to use these instruments, how to figure out where you are, and how to do different hold entries. So let's do it again. Let's say, okay, for simplicity, we'll stay at 3,000 feet, we'll stay at cruise airspeed. And now I'm just going to change his heading to something completely different. Let's put him heading up to the northeast. And I'm going to change his bearing to be, let's put him southeast of the station on a heading of northeast. And he's going to appear all the way over here, heading northeast. Just like that. There he is. Okay, you're flying again. Figure out what radio you're on, figure out how to get to the station. And this time I want you to hold west of the station using 1 minute legs. And I want you to do a left-hand hold instead of a right-hand hold. Anything like that. We can just redo scenarios time and time again. And now he knows he has to basically fly heading at 300 to get to the station. And then once he gets there, he's going to have to think, he's going to have to do the brain work as to what type of hold entry he has to do if he's going to hold west of the station with left-hand turns. So that's the beauty of the sim. I can do that. You saw me do it twice. I can do it 3 or 4 times in a row. As soon as he figures it out and gets established as what he needs to do, I can put him somewhere else, and he has to be thinking every time. You can't do that in a real airplane.
Did you have your course up instead of north up on the nav? As far as the orientation when he looks at his GPS? You had the course up, not
Right.
north.
All right,
Track-
on the
track- it's called track,
GPS.
though.
Yeah,
They call it
track.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and you saw a little bit of relocating there. This is also helpful when you want to repeat approaches. We can relocate the airplane back further on the localizer, and you can, once again, you can get in many more approaches than you might normally be able to in a real airplane.
68, 7,000. So I'm going to say.
So in this case, we're going to redo the
I'm going to say 7,000.
ILS runway 12 approach into Bozeman.
And current airspeed.
He just did it once. I'm going to move him back on the localizer so he can do it again.
And we're going to reposition by reference. 7,000 feet current airspeed track. Okay, there you go. So it should settle in now, and we're back to where we were. Okay. All right, so now we're coming up on Manny, heading down to the runway again. So, interestingly enough, like Manny, we were saying with the outer marker, he's got the frequency for that loaded up. And the single line blue needle, you're going to see that spin around when he crosses over Manny. And that's like 1930s, 1940s technology that's still usable to help him figure out where he is. See the needle spinning? He's crossing over Manny right now. Just want to stop that
Just for a second to talk a little bit about the Garmin G1000. This is an excellent platform to learn glass panel avionics, and you can see some of the different features just in that screenshot right there. You can see some of the different features of the G1000, the different needles that you can use, the flight plan, the inset map, DME, the flight director. So this is an excellent environment if you want to become familiar with newer glass panel avionics and learn those in a safe environment in the sim. Okay, on this topic of diversity, you may only get a chance flying in this local area to see a few different types of approaches. Or you might have to fly to Youngstown to do a DME arc or something like that. In the simulator, in any simulator like ours, you can figure out where the most interesting, challenging, and different types of approaches are located in the country, and then we can relocate you to these different airports, and you can try different types of approaches. And this is the ILS runway 12 into Bozeman, which does have a DME arc associated with it. So once again, LPV approaches, even ADF approaches. If you want to bounce around the country and check out different scenarios, that's a huge advantage of a simulator.
Plate, here's the airplane symbol based on what the bad elf is telling.
Okay. And I just wanted to bring up the point that Steve Smith just mentioned. Yes, we do have a bad elf GPS receiver. It's connected to the computer in the simulator, so the image that you get on your ForeFlight software on your iPad is exactly what you would experience in real life if you had a GPS receiver in flight. It works just the same.
The ForeFlight system on my iPad, so here we are on the runway 30. We'll be able to track ourselves outbound and inbound using the airplane symbol on the iPad, and it'll match up exactly with what's going on here. So you can see there's Manny, the outer marker Manny is here, and he's also got that frequency loaded up to see what's going on here. So everything is completely coordinated. Okay. If you wanted all the information you could get from the G1000 before you take off, that's pretty much what you get right there. So, and we can make it as accurate as we want, and we can do like simulated actual conversations with the controllers and tower. November 182 Romeo Bravo, you are clear for takeoff, runway 30. He's going to track outbound on the localizer. I'll give him vectors to come back around, and he's going to shoot this approach.
Can you, talking about simulated conversations with ATC?
Yes.
Talk to us about that. I mean, how
Okay.
comfortable are you guys with procedures? I mean, would it be a pretty realistic experience?
I think so, and I'll defer to Ron a little bit on that too, because we do scenarios every week, and we try to make it as realistic as possible based on what each pilot would prefer. For example, some people want to get their clearance delivered, they want to get instructions from ground controller, they want to talk to tower, they want to get handed off to approach, etc. So some folks come in there and they do want to do the full program, and we can do that. And other folks just would prefer to start at the runway and just take off themselves and then start talking to the controller once they're airborne. So we can tailor it to whatever the preferences are of the individual folks that are in the simulator. Also, you may have noticed there's some background radio chatter that goes on during some of these video clips. That is part of the software to create realism. In other words, realistic background noise appropriate to each frequency. In other words, if you're dialed into 125.35, you'll hear Cleveland approach control. They'll be talking to traffic just to give some realistic background noise. Now, they won't actually be talking to you directly in real time, so the software isn't that good, but it will give you some reasonable background chatter that you might expect on that frequency. The other thing I want to mention, this might be a good time along those lines, is you saw me changing the weather. And when I change the weather, the local ATIS frequencies will report the weather that I created. So that's another scenario that can make it more lifelike. If somebody wants to do that, they want to get their weather before they talk to clearance delivery or the ground controllers, they can do that. And it'll be accurate for the current conditions that are represented.
On the realism, you're not going to give us that phone number to call.
No. We could though.
If you want, you can do it. I've
Yeah.
got it on my iPhone,
Hey, does your checklist have that on it? Maybe I should get one. Pick up one of the checklists and bring that in there with me. But yeah, along those lines, I mean, you can go into restricted airspace in the simulator and not have to worry about fighter jets coming after you. So if you want to see the White House, I mean, this is the place to go flying. Okay, and the next video clip, we're gonna talk a little bit more about the G1000. And in this scenario that Rick is flying here, we take off from runway 30 at Bozeman. He gets vectors and then he shoots the approach. Well, before he takes off, we set up the G1000 with all the different information that we could, and that's what this video is going to show. You can really represent a lot of information on the G1000. Right now we're adding different bearing needles. We're adding Bozeman DME, changing our ADF frequency. And the other thing I want to mention too about this segment about learning avionics is you can learn to use a flight director in a safe environment. And I know I guess back in 1999, 2000 time frame, I was a member of a local flying club, and I was trying to get checked out in some of their more advanced airplane. They had a Saratoga that had a flight director and a flight control panel associated with that. And unfortunately, when I was getting checked out in the aircraft, the instructor I was working with he didn't have a background on the flight director. And I was a flight instructor at the time myself, and I did not have a background on how to use a flight director. So it's unfortunate that happens sometimes, and this is a really, really good, safe environment to learn how to use advanced avionics, not just the G1000 itself, but just general concepts of how to use a flight director safely. Set up all this information in advance before we even take off. Here to 44 or 46, 43, right? 46, 40, maybe 50. So we're setting it's going to warn us when we get down to that altitude. We'll see that pop up here. So that's the setup for this approach. This is another huge advantage of why you would want to practice some things in a simulator. You can experience failures in a safe environment before you would have to see them in real life. We can fail, and I'll talk about it in this video clip, we can fail any system, pedostatic vacuum system, we can fail instruments, and then you can see what that would look like in real life in the clouds, in the simulated scenario, before you might have to experience that in real life.
Let's do this. I'm going to clear all the weather. And there's Bozeman. We can create different instrument failures and systems failures. Right here from the screen, there's a tab at the instructor station. I can fail your airspeed indicator, heading indicator. I can fail your pedostatic system. I can fail your vacuum system. I can give you an alternator failure. So there's different scenarios here that I could impose on a pilot flying the sim, and or clear them all out when we're done. So this is a safe environment to experience any type of failure along these lines. So you can see what it would look like on the instruments before you have to do it in real life.
Just to really, Andy was demonstrating the failures set up on the instructor panel to really bring in the element of surprise of a failure. That same process can be duplicated. We have a PC computer outside the sim on a desk in the office, so the instructor can actually step out and do those same routines on the desktop. And of course, the pilot has not a clue. He could have gone to get a cup of coffee for all he knows. But it really does introduce the element of surprise in those cases if we use it that way.
Let's do this. I'm going to clear all the weather. And there's Bozeman. You can see the airport runway right there. That's where we're heading. Right, so now I will once again make his weather ugly. There you go. Got it. Perfect. Should be any heights in sight. There we go. So I can let's advance the time here. 5 hours. There we go. Nighttime.
That's runway 25 left at Phoenix Sky Harbor, and we just advanced the time during his takeoff roll so we can see what it looks like at night as well as daytime.
Much later in the evening, and here's what it looks like in darkness instead of during the daytime. And if you want to flip it back here one more time, we can make it light again. There you go. Now we're back in the daytime, just like that.
The other thing I have not talked about, we talked about the changing the visibility and cloud conditions and things like that. We can adjust the winds, so I can give crosswinds, gusty winds, different wind scenarios, change the temperature, higher density, altitude, all those different things can be changed.
And when he does that on the ground, if there's a windsock on the airport in view, the windsock will change both direction and strength appropriate to the change he made in the winds.
And the last category is airport operations. I can relocate you. In this case, we're going to go to Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, and you can check out the taxiways there. If you're planning to go into there, you can get a preview of different taxi routes that the controllers might give you there, and you can get familiar with different complex airports in a safe environment.
Okay, let's go to Phoenix Sky Harbor. Okay, so we're here at 25 left. And it's not a perfect scenario because we're starting at the end of the runway, and the more correct scenario would be we'd be starting somewhere here at a terminal at a ramp area and working our way out to here. But then again, you might have some kind of instrument failure when you're doing your run-up, and now you're not going to take off. You need to work your way through a very complex system of taxiways. Well, we can practice that. We can practice moving you around, getting taxi instructions from the ground controller, and working your way along different taxiways at a very complex airport like this. So, for this scenario, I could say, okay, Rick, let's say you had a bad magneto check, you're not going to take off, and you want to talk to the controllers and let them know that you want to go back to where you started from. Okay, well, they're going to give you some pretty complicated taxi instructions along these various taxiways, and if you've never seen that before, it's good to get practice here in the sim in a safe environment. November 001, Romeo Bravo, taxi to the west cargo area via taxiway Foxtrot 10, cross runway 25 right to Echo 10, and then west on taxiway Echo, or whatever, and I'm sure that's not exactly technically correct, but the point is I can give him some complicated taxi instructions so he can practice moving around at Phoenix Sky Harbor before he might actually have to do that in real life.
Okay, and the conclusion is, why would you want to use a flight simulator? And we just went through those different bullet points. Those are the reasons that Eagle Flight Simulation thinks you would want to use a flight simulator. A couple of other bullet points there. Figure out your personal minimums. That's a big one. How comfortable are you shooting an approach down to minimums versus 500 feet versus, breaking out right after the final approach fix? Well, you can figure that out in any simulator. And bottom line is proficiency equals safety. There's a difference between being legal and being proficient, and using a simulator is a great place to improve your skills and become proficient. So with that, I just want to mention we have some cards and brochures at the back table. I do appreciate your time. Thank you for being here, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to entertain
What's
us.
the cost?
Okay. The simulator costs $75 an hour for the equipment and $40 an hour for the instructor. However, we also have a membership deal, which is you join the club for $300 and you get 3 months unlimited use of the equipment, and then to the extent that you want to have an instructor with you, that would be $40 an hour extra. Now, you can come in by yourself every day if you wish, if the sim is available during that 3-month period that you pay your $300 and become a member. So you don't have to have an instructor with you unless you're trying to document currency requirements or training requirements. If you want to just come in yourself and practice approaches on your own, you can do that. After 2 or 3 sessions in the sim, we would sign you off to come in on your own. We have a schedule master system where you can check availability of the sim. And if the sim's open, you can put your name down for a time slot and come in on your own. And once again, the hours are from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. So if it's open, it's yours. Yes,
Can
sir.
you bring your own instructor, or
No. Bill Meyer and myself are the 2 flight instructors that are working there. We don't want outside instructors to come in and teach the clients.
okay?
Can you bring a non-instructor along to push the buttons and surprise you?
Yes, I think that's fine. We just don't want to outsource our flight instruction. Is really what the bottom line is.
But
So
once I'm up to speed and, I'm signed off, I'm doing it by myself, I can bring, somebody along to, another pilot and say, here, this is what I want you to do at time 10 minutes, push this failure and that kind of.
I think that's totally fair.
Right,
Yes.
and you can swap
We have a
around.
number of pilots.
Yes.
that
Okay,
A couple
okay,
of friends will
great.
come in and they'll just swap around.
They both have to be members though, right? To
Yes.
fly it,
Yes.
but not to sit as an observer.
Oh, they can sit in, there's an open rear door in this, so you can have a pilot, an instructor, and you can even have a third person sitting just watching over his shoulder.
I mean, if you bring a second person to sit in the co-pilot seat,
Mhm.
do they have to be a member?
I would say no.
No,
Okay.
I agree with
Be your
that.
wife
Bring somebody in, bring somebody with you.
or significant
Yeah.
Provide
Can you
that.
do that?
They don't-
Yes, sir.
they can, and they don't have to.
I would just like to make a couple of points. I've been going every week for a year and a
Yeah,
half.
well, they know.
I fly every
So what if
Tuesday
you like
night,
them and you,
They
and
know by, I guess.
routinely, we use an autopilot in our own aircraft. But I choose to fly hand flying. And we alternate, mostly we do the G1000. But I'd say once a month we go to the 430, 530. Because as a flight instructor, I fly with various people in various airplanes, so I like to stay current with everything. The other point, my son Steve lost a friend, Martin Luther King Day just a few weeks ago. Don and his wife were flying their Citation jet. He's a real estate developer in Tucson. They departed Salt Lake City, climbing to 18,000. The autopilot fails. So there was an in-flight breakup. Don and his wife were killed. Now, why, if you listen to ATC tapes, it sounds like a student pilot in a 150, it's pathetic. Now, why couldn't Don hand fly that airplane after his autopilot failed? Here he lost his life because he didn't do something like this. So hand flying is challenging. We're too dependent on autopilots. And Andy gets you really up to speed flying without all of your stuff working. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
One comment I wanted to make is, we do have autopilots. The G1000 panel is equipped with the GFC 700, and the 530, 436 pack is equipped with a CAP 140. So you can you learn to use those autopilots, knowing there are a lot of autopilots out there, and no two of them are identical, but they all have similar features and programming capabilities, and we can be flying, and that can be failed as well, like everything else, which is kind of segues from Ron's statement about his friend who he recently lost. So we can set you up in that situation. As Andy said, we can set you up in a high density altitude. We can also change weight and balance. We can give you an aft CG, a significant aft CG, an overgross situation, and the airplane will perform that way, or the simulator will perform that way. I had a couple other comments, not to stop the questions, and this may lead to more, but One thing, a couple things I think Andy did mention, but one thing, this simulator is configured as a Cessna 182 RG. We chose that as kind of a middle-of-the-road airplane. You can fly it with the gear down and appropriate power settings for a 172 or a Cherokee, and it'll perform that way. You can raise the gear and, you know, throttle all the way in, and you can approach bonanza speeds if you fly it that way. So there's a range of opportunities depending on what you normally fly. This is a 182 RG. Andy showed these different ways to relocate, but I'd like to cover those again. There are 3 ways to relocate the sim. One is, and he did all of these, one is on an airport. We can go from airport to airport to airport and put you on the ground on a particular runway, change the weather, whatever we do, and locate you on that airport. This, by the way, is a worldwide database. So if you want to do approaches in Charles de Gaulle, or Manchester, England, or Sydney, Australia, I've done those 3. I've done turns around a point around the Eiffel Tower. But we can locate by airport, we can locate by nav aid, as he showed you, with a radial and an altitude and a direction from a nav aid, whether it be VOR or NDB. And we can also, the reference that he showed you, where we can actually just pause the sim, and with the stylus just drag you out to a new location. So you can conceivably do the ILS-1 into Akron, Canton, stop it when you break out, pause it, and we can just drag you back down maybe 6 miles southwest of Briggs VOR and start all over again, which is a great feature. The other thing you saw in the one slide towards the end is the simulator has a 200-degree wraparound view. You could, in the one shot, you could see the strut, so you can see more than just what's in front of you, unlike a lot of other simulators, particularly the desktop simulators. You are totally enclosed in this simulator. And you get a lot different feel in this simulator than you do in a typical desktop or single screen or double screen simulator. So,
Can you talk, can you tell us about what's loggable here and how that works out?
Yeah, I can tell you what I know, because this is changing. This has changed. When we first got the simulator, way back when, I'll start with an instrument student. You could log 10 hours of time on a simulator towards an instrument rating. Several years ago, they upped that to 20 hours. Last January of 2015, they cut it back down to 10. There are supposedly moves underway to bring it back up to 20, but I've seen nothing in the way of any political action, AOPA, NAFI, EAA, anybody else who's trying to push that. They seem to be pushing hard on the third-class medical these days. That's what you read about. So that's the situation for an instrument student, 10 hours of time. Now that student can fly 30 hours of time on a simulator, just for the experience. It can only log 10. For currency purposes in the simulator, and this has been a moving target over the last couple of years, and you might jump in here and correct me if I'm wrong, but the latest is to log an approach for currency, you must have an instructor with you. That wasn't the case when we started this sim. We've had this for 3 years, and that was not the case. We have a letter of authorization from Redbird on the wall next to the simulator that states what we could do at that time. And that currency requirement has to be done every 2 months. You have to do your if you're doing it solely with a simulator, maintaining your currency, you have to do the 6 approaches, the holds, the tracking, every 2 months, and you have to fly 3 hours on the sim.
And the unusual attitudes.
And the unusual attitudes, 2 nose high, thank you. 2 nose high, 2 nose low. Thanks. And those are a little hard to do because there's only one control set in the simulator. The instructor does not have any controls other than the instructor station. So those are a little bit tough, but those are where the regulations stand now. And I think over time, or I'll say, I hope over time, they'll be subject to change because they have been tightened up and almost, I don't know, negating the advantages of a simulator. I mean, for features, it has like just that pause mode that you can stop, talk about what went wrong, you forgot to correct for the left crosswind, whatever it may be, I mean, that's just worth so much. In addition to all the failures and other things you can do that you would not normally do, or at least normally and intelligently do in an airplane. The IPC,
How much is an IPC?
I knew you were gonna ask that.
And you gotta do it every 2 months now?
No, that hasn't changed. It's just the currency I'm talking about, the 6 months currency. The instrument currency. The IPC you can do, I can't tell you how much because depending on how much time you fly, but you can do all of an IPC except you have to do one circle to land, one instrument approach with a circle to land in an airplane. The rest of it you can do on an IPC, but in terms of how much, it depends on how much time you take to do it, how much you want to do. What's that?
Typical price.
You could do it in 2 hours. Easy, I think.
Right, so that'd be $150 for the equipment and then $80 for the instructor in that scenario.
Unless you're a member.
Right.
And then you pay for the equipment.
So $230 if you're not a member.
Right, but then you would still, as Bill mentioned, you'd still have to fly in a real airplane to do the task associated with shooting an approach and then doing a circle away.
Plus 8% tax on the simulator.
So the simulator doesn't really qualify you for an IPC.
That's correct, not by itself.
Not- That one element you have to do in an airplane. Everything else you can do in the sim.
What,
The other approaches.
The approach
In
and
the
circle
practical
land.
test standards, everything that's got a P next to it, I believe, all of those elements, all of those tasks you have to perform as part of an IPC.
So I am not out of line when I talk about pilot perks and, the relationship that Eagle has with Ethiopia.
We offer that same deal that I outlined to you and frankly to everybody. So the advantage is the 3-month membership is the real advantage.
One other thing though, it's in the way of a pilot perk for everybody is, the Cleveland Jet Center is just a great FBO. They've been really, really good to us. We have a beautiful office, we have their run-up facilities, we have free coffee, they usually make popcorn for us, we have access to a conference room, a pilot's lounge, a nice exercise room, lots of parking. They are waiving parking fees for members of Eagle Flight Sim that fly in. For those of you who live here in the deep south of the state, you could conceivably, and some have flown up to CGF and parked for a couple of hours and not had to pay the normal parking fee, which is a small perk. And that will also be waived for the May 14th event.
Okay, we had another question.
Yeah, can you use the sim to validate the flight portion of wings points?
That's a good one. That's a good one.
I'll have to look into that.
I don't know
I
that.
do not know that one. Good question.
How much, if any, because I haven't heard you say anything about it, does the software program, while you are practicing any of the scenarios, throw in random traffic?
Oh, it does, yeah.
It does.
Point.
That's a good point, it
Yeah,
does.
Including on the ground.
I don't know when and how, but I can tell you that other aircraft show up. In fact, the other day, I think it was with Gary.
Yeah, we had a truck.
Gary Weaver and I were in there, and a truck pulled out on the taxiway, and honestly, we ran it down and hit it just to see what would happen. I've never seen that before. We wanted to take advantage of that opportunity to see how realistic it was, and yes, we did in fact crash when we hit the truck.
Does it simulate deer crossing the runway too?
I think Gary's seen deer. I haven't seen deer in there. Yeah, so it does have random things that'll pop up, like deer, trucks, and other traffic.
So I could work on my kill ratio. I could rank where it is now.
And you can almost stack those odds in favor of you. If you go into Cleveland Hopkins on a day where the wind's coming out of the southwest and you fly an ILS-6 approach, you will very likely see an airplane taking off right in opposite direction because that's the runway being favored.
And this would be both random non-ADS-B type aircraft in the pattern and something that would and would not necessarily show up on an ADS-D display. Okay. So.
I forgot to mention that. And that is truly random.
I have no idea when and how the traffic shows up, but it does.
If you get deer, you should call Catering, there's airlines there. Sorry. I'm telling you, it's really real. I end up sweating sometimes thinking that if I get behind the airplane, you know, I'm glad there's pause sometimes, so I can just, because you can't do that in the real world. Hit that pause and go like, what's going on? What am I looking at? Where am I at? You know, what am I doing? Because you can get really caught up in that. I'm not a video game person, but it's really, really good.
And Redbird has been real good to us. We occasionally will have a question or a glitch. We'll talk to them on the phone, and they can get on our simulator. They're in near Austin, Texas, somewhere in Texas, and they'll do that. And sometimes they'll do updates overnight. They'll say, just when you go home, the last one out, leave the computer on, and they'll update things overnight, and then they'll shut off the computer when the update is finished. So they've been very prompt and very, not that we've had very many issues at all. We've had this sim now, it'll be 3 years next month. We've had this sim for a time, but they've been very prompt and very effective in helping us with those particularly the updates.
How many simulators people need to make appointments?
Yes, there's just the one. And with Schedule Master, if you're familiar with renting airplanes from flying clubs, the flying schools, the majority of them use Schedule Master, which is an online program that you can call up a day in an aircraft. Our Schedule Master treats these as two different airplanes, the 182S and the 182G for six-pack and glass, because we want the instructors to be and Rick to be the only ones who actually change out the panel. But it doesn't take long, but we use Schedule Master, just like any of the flights, most of the flight schools do.
Is that good? You guys all know my philosophy about training. You know, if you trained for something unforeseen, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable if it actually happens to you. And you know, using a simulator, and I have not been, I'm embarrassed to say, a big simulator user in my past, but that is going to change, not just for cost purposes, but also for the practical aspects of getting your time in and getting your opportunities to experience unexpected contingencies. And if you can say, well, I have gone through a vacuum failure, even though it's been simulated, or I have gone through an engine fire, even though it's been simulated, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable if it actually happens to you. This is a big deal, and it's going to become a big deal. I mean, if you think about the progress that electronics engineers have made in the last 40 years, this kind of thing is a tremendous boon to not just pilots, but to our entire society. And we should truly take advantage of it. Thank you very much, fellas.
Thank you. Thanks
This
for
has
having
been
us.
really fun. We don't know what we're going to do in April, but there'll be another safety seminar at the end of April. Lou.
Has anybody here seen the control tower?